The quote here actually raises a very kind of scary issue. What happens when the marginal cost of launching a personalized attack starts to approach zero? If you think about it, usually hackers using phishing attacks would send out mass emails, to a million people or whatever it might be, very, very impersonal. A few people might fall for it, people who are very gullible, but for the most part, people wouldn't fall for it. Once you can start using personal information, based on social networking, based on charitable interests, based on whatever it might be, and you can also automate the gathering and then the using of that personal information, that's really scary because that can make the phishing attacks much more attractive to draw people in. So there are actually 6 different characteristics that make people want to accept other people's requests, to trust people. Now these were originally researched actually as things that make people trust others, not having anything to do with social engineering. Mitnick and Simon, though, basically looked at this list from Cialdini, a psychology professor, and said, hey, wait a second, that matches up with our research on social engineering. So they basically used Cialdini's framework, I guess, his 6 different characteristics that make people trust others and accept their requests as a way of thinking about specific vulnerabilities for social engineering. So basic psychological characteristics are turned into vulnerabilities with social engineering. The first one of those is reciprocation. People feel like they have to repay you, even if they didn't want what they got. So for example, charities, religious organizations use this all the time. They'll come up to you, in a train station or wherever. Usually it's fairly innocuous. They'll give you a book, and you feel like you have to start up a conversation, or they'll give you candy or whatever. You feel like you have to give them money or start up a conversation or something. You feel some sense of obligation. So in this example, a hacker could, give a chocolate to a guard, something simple, not a big thing, because otherwise the guard would start to recognize it as a bribe, and he also can't request something in return immediately, because again, the guard will recognize it as a bribe. But you can give the guard a chocolate in the morning, and then later in the day you can come back, oh, by the way, I think I forgot my backpack inside. Would you mind letting me in? My badge is in my backpack. Would you mind letting me in? The guard will very often let him in because he feels a need to reciprocate. Similarly, or I guess it's similar to the underlying issue of a person feeling a sort of psychological sense of indebtedness, even though they don't necessarily have a reason to, is this second version of reciprocation. People are much more likely to accept a lesser request if they have already rejected a larger one. So for example here, when random passers-by in a zoo were asked just flat out, straight out, will you accompany juvenile inmates to the zoo one time for a couple hours? Most said no, 17% said yes. When they were first asked, will you go every week for 2 hours a week for 2 years? Very few people said yes to that first request. But then 50% said yes to the second request that was identical to the request where they were asked just flat out. So it's a very powerful psychological characteristic that hackers can use also. Consistency. People want to feel that if they said something, they express something about themselves, about their worldviews, or whatever, they want to feel consistent with it. They want to follow through. In one really interesting experiment, I thought, a researcher sent a homeless person to an area, try to collect donations. Okay, he got a few. In a second version of the experiment, a second group, the researcher actually sent a petition to the same residential area. The petition simply was just supporting homeless people. That's all. Nothing about giving money, nothing about, no specifics, just supporting homeless people. 2 weeks later, again, this had no explicit connection to that original petition. The experimenter sent around a homeless person to the area asking for donations. This time, the residents of the neighborhood gave double the amount they had given the first time, because the residents had already expressed support for homeless people, and they had to feel consistent. They had to follow through. So hackers, for example, could find new employee names, call them up and say, hi, I'm from the IT department. Do you follow all of our security policies? Obviously, a new employee will say yes. The hacker could then give the target, made-up security policies such as you must store your password in this place that the hacker could then later exploit. The next one is social validation, essentially peer pressure, which I think we've all experienced. A really interesting example from Cialdini's article actually was that some ad campaigns have actually backfired because of social validation. When they say smoking is such a huge burden on the country, so many people do it, and it's very expensive for the country, for the medical system, that kind of backfires because people say, oh, wait a second, so many other people do it, it's not so bad. Even though the message of the ad is supposed to be that it's bad and everyone should stop, that's not always what comes across. So a hacker could obviously call up and say, your colleagues, your friends, your neighbors, whomever, has already taken this survey, you should too. Next one is liking or likability. If someone's funny and flatters you, acts like they have a shared background, wow, you're from St. Louis also? That's so cool, where are you from? Etc. You can very easily exploit this feeling of comfort, this feeling of closeness that you've developed for nefarious ends. Obviously, charity solicitors and salesmen do this very well, so do hackers. Authority. People tend to defer to people who appear to have the status of authority. The status of authority can be conferred on them simply by wearing a suit and tie. In this example here, in one experiment, just wearing a suit and tie raised by over 3 times the number of people who followed the experimenter across the street against the traffic light. Similarly, when a random person, the experimenter, basically a random person called nurses and said, you should give out drugs, and the dosage the person on the phone actually said to give out was 2 times the maximum rate allowed, the maximum rate legal. But the person on the phone said, I'm a doctor, you should listen to me. Nurses did it. It's pretty scary. Hackers can do this all the time. In one interesting example, a consultant was basically testing the defenses of a given company, put on a Cisco shirt, walked up to the company and said, hi, I'm the Cisco guy. I'm here to fix a network. No one asked him for credentials. He had a Cisco shirt. He acted like he knew what he was doing. He went straight to the place where he was supposed to go to. He let him straight in. He brought cookies, got some reciprocity with his neighbors, hung out with them in the coffee breaks, told jokes, etc. They liked him. If he'd been a real hacker, he could have done anything he wanted essentially within that company's network. Scarcity. If something appears scarce, people want it. Marketers use this all the time. You'll see limited edition M&Ms. How are they limited editions, right? You have millions and millions of them coming out every day. But just the fact that you package it, you say limited edition, makes it more attractive. So hackers can use this. You've won one of 3 iPads. Or, to make it a much more targeted, more dangerous attack, they could say, Paul Candle, you're an excellent Syracuse iSchool student. You've been nominated for this award. Just click here for details. They could do that, and, I'm sure many of us would fall for that. Okay, so what countermeasures can we use? First of all, it's important to know that no combination of countermeasures, no matter how strong, are going to be 100% secure. There's no such thing. However, a combination of strong technology, broad user awareness, and very specific behaviors that users know about and are drilled to follow can combine to make a pretty secure system against social engineering. Technology. A lot of research has actually shown that systems that use heuristics to actually detect deception can be better than people. You can use, natural language processing. You can use image processing. You can use different types of algorithms to actually detect deception in ways that people cannot. You can also use blacklists. Obviously you don't want people using or clicking on known bad websites, known bad emails, etc. You can use watermarks on valid websites. You can check for differences between real websites and purported to be real websites. You can do all sorts of comparisons like that. You can also use biometrics. Now, if you have enough biometrics, enough factors in your biometric authentication, it's really hard to fake, right? You can have vein recognition in your eyes. You can have fingerprint recognition, voice recognition, all sorts of other things, right? Now, those are very hard to fake. that doesn't mean it's impossible to get around it, because, for example, a hacker could convince a user, an employee, to actually authenticate with their own biometric credentials, and then the hacker could take control at that point. So, again, not every heuristics will not detect every attempted deception. No comparison software will catch everything. Biometrics can be beaten. However, if you combine them, the odds of succeeding in your defenses are much higher, especially when combined with the next two. User awareness. Users have to be aware. Employees have to be aware of the threats of social engineering. And it's not just a matter of having a one-time course. Once a year even, twice a year even, that's not enough. You have to put signs around them, have regular communications. You have to actually get them involved, make it feel real, right? Have people involved in protecting their own information at home, on the road, wherever it might be, on their own devices. Also, you have to role model alertness. You also have to be aware that hackers can actually use psychology of fear. They can use awareness of users against them. So in one famous example that several different sources talked about, one of which was Thompson, who made the comment about the price of personalization going to zero. One famous example here is that someone waits in a locker room or walks around an office, whatever it might be, and steals a credit card, leaves everything else intact. And then they follow the person whose credit card they just stole. Once the target, the victim, recognizes that the credit card was stolen, the hacker waits a couple minutes, don't want to be too obvious, but waits a couple minutes and calls them and says, "Hi, I'm from the bank. It looks like your card was stolen. Give me your PIN number and I'll shut it down right now." Now, obviously, anyone who's fallen for that, I'm sure, will feel very stupid about falling for it, because who gives out a PIN number on the phone? In the heat of the moment, though, someone who's very aware of the possibility of their credit card being stolen, all of their money being stolen, their bank account being drained, they will very often react, instinctively, yes, please shut it down, do whatever it takes. So this is a kind of scary mechanism that hackers can actually use to subvert user awareness. So you also have to have specific behavioral protocols. So for example, users should be drilled on verifying identity of someone asking for information. Someone calls you up and says, "Hi, I'm from your insurance company. I need to know whatever," pretty much anything. You need to have a way to verify who the person calling actually is, whether it's calling an insurance company phone number, something. You need to make sure that workers know who it is. Someone you don't recognize says, "You just hold the door for me." You need to make sure you're not actually holding the door for someone who's trying to get in to steal stuff. A variety of different similar issues. Obviously, anyone asking about any software on your computer sets off immediate alarm bells, because what they can actually do is they can have tailored versions of documents or whatever types of files, whatever emails it might be that are made specifically for specific software versions with vulnerabilities. So you never want to give out information about what software, what system you are running. Something I've actually seen a lot, even in major companies, major organizations, is communication from IT. This is a real issue and a real vulnerability. Communication with IT has to come through predefined, official, legitimate channels. If an IT person calls you on their personal cell phone, first of all, that should not happen. But also, I as an employee, as a user, I should know that if a phone call is coming from someone's personal cell phone, I should know that cannot be IT. Because once you set the precedent that communication from IT can come from any random personal cell phone, and that opens up the door for a hacker to use their own personal cell phone to call users, to call employees. Now, as far as I know, I have not been the target of any social engineering attack. I've just had stupid IT people call me. But those stupid IT people really have to know that they are opening up a vulnerability by training employees the wrong way, training employees to answer and to respect requests coming from essentially unidentified sources. I hope you've learned a lot about social engineering, and also that this presentation hopefully will help prevent you from falling victim to social engineering attacks. You can read a lot more in the bibliography, and if you're interested, if you want to prepare yourself more, prepare your employees more, I would definitely recommend you do so.